Thank you very much, Chair, Vice Chairs, members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of the Windsor Essex Chamber of Commerce, representing over 40,000 employees in Windsor Essex and 775 businesses. I want to start with a very simple point. This is not a theoretical trade issue. This is an immediate industrial capacity issue. In a region like Windsor Essex, my hometown, this means something very real. If this industry weakens, every household in the region will feel economic pain. The revised 232 tariffs have national implications for jobs, growth, defence readiness, Canada's resilience, and long-term prosperity. Why this matters nationally. Windsor Essex is one of the most intensive manufacturing regions across Canada. We have 48,800 jobs, so 1 in 5 employees in Windsor Essex are in this industry. We have Canada's most intense, largest tool die and mould cluster, valued at approximately $2 billion, with approximately 85% of that heading to the United States. Unemployment currently sits at about 8.5%, down from 11.2% in mid-2025. Manufacturing here in Windsor Essex is not peripheral, it's foundation to our region and to Canada's economy. So what's changed? This is no longer a steel tariff. It's a tax on Canadian manufacturing. Our companies don't ship raw steel, my companies. They ship finished, value-added products. What's being taxed now isn't just the inputs. It's labor, it's engineering, it's innovation. The impact is immediate. We're seeing tariff exposure multiply overnight. What used to cost a few $1,000s is now in the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars of tariffs. At that level, contracts don't adjust. They become unworkable. And when contracts become unworkable, production decisions must follow. The damage is not just at the end of the supply. It's upstream, where the work actually begins. In Windsor Essex, that means machinery manufacturing industry, NAICS code 333, represents 8,000 jobs across 188 firms, nearly $80,000 in average wage. Extrapolating that to Ontario, we're looking at 62,000 jobs, and at the national level, 149,000 jobs. When you use standard economic multipliers of approximately 3, that's 25,000 jobs in Windsor Essex, and a shocking 450,000 jobs nationally. This is just one of the potential industry codes that are being affected. This is where the issue becomes bigger than tariffs. The Windsor-Detroit corridor is one of the most integrated manufacturing regions in the world. For decades, our region, and a large part of Ontario, has been deeply integrated with our purchasers, suppliers, colleagues, and oftentimes family on the United States side of the border. Although this relationship is currently challenged, it's vital to recognize the deep and mutually beneficial ties to our two countries have had and will continue to have. Parts in this industry cross the border multiple times. That system depends on predictability. Right now, this is not predictable. A mutually beneficial trade deal with the United States allows for this predictability. Without predictability, if this continues, the results are straightforward. Production will shift, investment will follow, jobs will move. At the same time, the Government of Canada has been clear about its priorities. Through a recent defence and industrial strategic frameworks advanced by Prime Minister Carney, our country must, and I agree, rebuild domestic industrial supply, strengthen allied supply chains, reduce dependency on non-aligned offshore producers, and treat industrial inputs as strategic assets. Here's the contradiction. Section 232 tariffs are actively weakening the very upstream base those strategies depend on. The tooling and advanced manufacturing industry is not optional infrastructure. It is the enabling layer beneath defense manufacturing, automotive and EV production, aerospace components, energy, critical minerals, and infrastructure projects. If we lose tooling capability, we do not reshore defense production, we do not control timelines, we do not control costs, and we do not control security of supply. If we lose that capability, we lose more than production. We lose control of our national and economic security. What we're asking for right now to support this industry is not a permanent resolution, it's a bridge. Our asks are reinstate temporary blanket remission framework for the affected industries, provide short-term cash flow relief, urgently resolve Section 232 within the CUSMA framework, and ensure federal trade responses measure upstream impacts, not just finished goods. The bottom line, and I'll close with this. Behind every number I've shared is a real decision being made, whether to absorb the losses, walk away from contracts, or move companies somewhere else. These are not large multinationals. They are Canadian manufacturers employing skilled trades, engineers, and apprentices across this country. These are Canadians working hard to build Canada strong. We have a narrow window to act. If we do, we protect jobs, preserve industrial capacity, and stay aligned with our long-term economic and security objectives. If we do not, this market will make the decisions for us. We built our economy getting this right, and we can't afford to get this wrong. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donally. Okay, colleagues, we'll enter into our first round of questions. Mr. Epp, welcome back to the Industry Committee. The floor is yours for 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. Business hates uncertainty, and that's why I think the sectors that are testifying today, and indeed the Canadian public, breathed a bit of sigh of relief or had some confidence when they were promised by the Prime Minister that there would be a deal with the U.S. by last July. But here we are today, 8 months later. The plan now is for trade diversification away from the American markets. In fact, the Prime Minister has indicated that our relationship with the U.S. is a weakness. As further proof, what landed in my mailbox this week is actually a flyer from the member for Ottawa Centre, where the U.S. doesn't even highlight under the heading of expanding trades, Canada's trade partners. And so I'll begin with Mr. Loomis. Mr. Loomis, do you agree that our trading relationship with the U.S. is a weakness? How long would it take for your members to replace U.S. demand with alternative export markets?
Thank you for that question, MPF, and it's good to see you again. Thank you so much for all your support of our industry. So getting back to free trade with the U.S. is the most important thing that we can have as an industry. That's where we do all of our export work. Very little goes overseas. It's very difficult for us to see us doing any work overseas, just with some of the protections that other countries have, including countries or like the Euro Union, that does a really good job. Even if we have a free trade agreement, they do a really good job of keeping out foreign steel in their projects. And so for us, we want to get back to doing that. Steel is also very heavy, and that's the other aspect of us not really being able to do work in other markets besides the U.S. So we want to get back to that. That's why I say it's really important. However, there are more jobs to be gained if we protect our own domestic industry, if we are able to ensure that, especially on taxpayer-funded projects, that we are using Canadian steel and Canadian fabricated steel. That's the most important aspect, is that the value add work be done here. And if you're using Canadian steel, you're probably guaranteeing that all the value add work will be done here in Canada as well. So that's really important to us. There's a lot of opportunities to be gained by having our own market. The private sector is also, we're seeing a lot of jobs going overseas. We're seeing primarily with the big projects, so a lot of the resource projects, and then a lot of the taxpayer-funded large projects like bridge projects here in Canada as well. When you're using a multinational engineering or general contracting company, that's where all the leakage is going in terms of jobs and work going overseas. So it's really important for us, especially on taxpayer-funded projects, but the private sector too. We should be applying pressure to the private sector to be using Canadian steel and Canadian value-add
Sorry,
work
Mr.
here.
Loomis.
Yes.
Mr. Epp's been trying to get something in, and his mic wasn't highlighted. Dave, don't worry.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you 30 seconds back. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just one more quick question, short answer, please. How long can your companies continue to operate under the current tariff regime before permanent cuts come, before closures?
I would say something's going to happen over the course of this year. This 10% levy on the total value, that before that we were allowed to continue doing work in the U.S. As long as we were using American steel. Now this is probably the single most harmful thing that the United States has done over the last 2 years to our fabrication industry. I expect that we will have job cuts over the course of this year if we don't do the things that we're recommending in terms of domestic procurement.
So can you plan 6 to 12 months ahead right now or not?
No, it's hard.
Than the urgency of response to the challenges you're facing from the government right now?
It's very urgent. Absolutely. Our order books are not filling up. So we're running out of the jobs that we earned a couple of years ago we're now getting to those jobs, and we have had very few jobs added to our order books over the course of the last year. And as I said, this newest move will cause even more harm to this industry.
It's the single most important thing that the government could do in the next 30 to 60 days.
It would be to apply the domestic procurement policies to all federally funded projects and to encourage the provinces where there isn't federal money to do the same, and to require that the municipalities, that the provinces require the municipalities to also support domestic, buy domestic, and fabricate domestic.
I'm going to switch over to Mr. Donally. I know that the downstream aluminum industries face some of the same challenges that the downstream steel manufacturers did as well. I know that there were some short-term TRQs, tariff rate quotas, put in place for manufactured steel products coming in, but none of that came in for the aluminum industry. So, Mr. Donally, can you comment about the effects specifically in aluminum and some of your other members that aren't protected by the dumping that's occurring from third-party, non-market economies coming into the country?
Thank you, through you, Chair, to MPEP. I can't get too specific in it, but what I can say is in the data package I provided to you, it very likely fits within the NAICS Code 331, which has, again, significant impacts as it relates to this current tariff policy. Business would like to always have an equal playing field. So if it is impacted from the steel perspective, I think the aluminum perspective should also be considered.
And I'm going to ask you to finish with this very same question. What needs to happen now for your members to stay viable, to be able to plan, and to be able to survive?
Thank you again. I do think it is vital that a free and comprehensive trade deal is established. I say that to your point earlier, MPEP, is I think what's important as it relates to diversification is not just taking the pie and splitting it different ways. So you heard me talk about the relationship with Canada, United States, and Windsor Essex and Detroit. I think it's vital that we don't just take the pie and split it different ways to other countries. I would love to see the relationship with the United States continue and even grow, but also diversify also away from that. It's important that we do have a bigger pie to share, not just take the same pie and split it different ways. So I think that's vitally important that everybody hears in this room.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Rep. Ms. Gould, welcome to the Industry Committee. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to my Liberal members for allowing me to join them today. I come from Burlington, Ontario, and steel and manufacturing is really important for us in the Burlington and Hamilton area. And I read a report recently out of the University of Calgary, which actually looks at the percentage of U.S. imports by province and how they're impacted by 232 tariffs. And so while in Ontario, 20% of our GDP is reliant on trade with the United States, 60% of that trade to the U.S. is impacted by Section 232 tariffs. Ontario is the most impacted province when it comes to Section 232 tariffs in the country because we are big producers of steel and aluminum or value-added aluminum, as well as auto and auto parts. So I particularly appreciate my colleagues from Hamilton and Windsor for being here today. I guess one of the questions that I had was, with regards, I'll start with you, Mr. Donally, perhaps, because it's what you were talking about. So in Burlington and Hamilton, we have thousands of people who work in the steel and auto sectors, tens of thousands of people who are indirectly employed by those sectors. When I talk to manufacturers in my community, they're often SMEs, family-owned. Upwards of 70 to 90% of their business is in the United States, but they have chosen to stay in Canada. Mr. Donally, what would help your members and companies like that in my riding who are so reliant on the U.S. market to diversify? Do you have some examples for us?
Thank you, through you, Chair, to MP Gould. I briefly touched on it, but right now what the industry is facing is a 10% tariff on finished goods. And my members, and I can speak to Southwestern Ontario, specifically Windsor Essex, they recognize that within the next 3 to 6 months, they are going to face very dire cash flow issues. And what that means is, as I alluded earlier, they're going to have to make decisions. And those decisions may be to close their shop because many of the ownership of these companies are, 50s, 60s, ready to close it up. And they've been challenged with multiple challenges over the past decades. That being said, they are getting requested to move to the United States. That is a question that is out there and is quite regular from some of the purchasers. I think in order to maintain this industry, and likely the industries you're speaking about also, I do believe that there is an immediate need for cash flow support to make sure that these companies still continue to exist in 6 months to a year. I can say that there are, and I've had conversations, people are looking to diversify. They recognize, and many of the companies have already, it's not just auto, right? Like it's applied all throughout the industry. They're looking to make those changes. They can't make those changes under this type of cost pressure and this type of intensive pressure. So an immediate cash flow reserve that helps support those industries when they do ship that product across the border, that if there is, let's say, a bank account that they could draw back against the cost of that tariff, I think that would be vital. I know multiple of these companies are working on trying to become defense certified, and there's multiple steps along the way. As I alluded to earlier, that's to grow their pie. That's to diversify their own portfolio. So I think that's vital, is the diversification.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Donally. I really appreciate that, and I think it applies to the same kinds of companies that I have in my riding as you have in Windsor. I really appreciate it. Mr. Loomis, great to see you, as always. You said a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. Obviously, the government has done a lot when it comes to supporting the steel industry and steel fabricators in Canada and steel derivatives. But you talked about two things that I'd like you to expand a little bit more on. You talked about increasing the tariff on non-FTA producers. I'm hoping you can discuss what impact that would have on domestic producers of steel and jobs in our country. And then the second is encouraging the federal government, or requiring the federal government to encourage provinces, territories, municipalities to use domestically produced steel. I'm hoping you can talk about a little bit more what that would mean for jobs in our country. You talked about the fact that this latest 232 tariff is really drying up the order books for Canadian companies, and this will have an impact on thousands of jobs in our community and across this country. But perhaps you could also talk about what some of the barriers are for provinces, territories, and municipalities to access domestic steel, and what the federal government can do to alleviate some of those barriers. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, MP Gould. It's good to see you again as well. So first of all, when it comes to derivatives, we're just happy that there is now a broad recognition in Ottawa that, there is far greater breadth and depth to the Canadian steel industry than just the primary production of steel. That's, that's a big important part of the economy to my hometown of Hamilton and your hometown of Burlington as well. But as we see, just within the structural steel industry, and there are far more derivative steel fabricators and manufacturers in this country, but just in structural steel, as I said, we employ 30,000 people across the country. So we do really, really appreciate the extension of the protections of the Canadian steel industry down through the value chain to the derivative industries. What we're finding, however, is we're seeing pricing right now that is far below that, particularly coming from China. And this is not, I'm not trying to be xenophobic here. This is not about that. It's just the whole situation, and the reason for the 232 tariffs in the U.S. is because of the overcapacity of production in China. And what we're seeing and what I'm hearing is that even a derivative surtax of 300% we would need it to be at that level to put us on an even playing steel. So it's important to recognize that, yes, we have to protect our free trade agreement countries, and the 25% does a really good job of putting us on a level playing field there. But it is not the case when it comes to one country in particular. So more needs to be done there. When it comes to domestic procurement, like I said, right now it only applies to situations in which the federal government is the procurement agency. But the federal government really, in the grand scheme of things, only purchases a small amount of steel compared to the provincial governments and the municipal governments. But the federal government provides a lot of funding to projects in our provinces and our municipalities. So I think it would be easy to leverage in the funding agreements the requirement to buy Canada. And that shouldn't mean that municipalities and provinces are going to be paying more. And as the other note is that
Mr.
all
Loomis,
the protections. Yes.
I'm afraid I've let it go about 90 seconds over,
Okay.
and I'm very appreciative of the insight, but I'm going to keep us
All
a
right.
little bit on track. That
Understood.
I'm sure, be another opportunity for you to finish that
Sure.
thought.
Thank you.
Monsieur Saint-Marie, la parole à vous pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Saint-Marie, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the witnesses for being here and for your presentations. We're learning a great deal. My first questions will be for Mr. Donally. As you stated, the last executive order by President Trump puts on Trump tariffs, puts a tariff on intermediate products exported to the U.S., not only on the steel and aluminum that was previously targeted. According to you, does that seem to contradict the rules of the CUSMA Free Trade Agreement, and is it illegal? And in your opinion, does it also appear to contradict the previous executive order that the tariff would be 50% on steel and aluminum, and now the final percentage is much higher?
To the Vice Chair. I'm not a trade lawyer by any stretch, but what I can say is that feedback from my members that deal with this on a daily basis believe that this is something that is extended beyond the notion of what the 232 tariffs were. This does extend into essentially a tariff on the value added, the labor, the intelligence, the man hours, person hours that are brought into any of the products that are shipped through the United States. So I won't speak specifically on the illegal nature of that, but it does seem to extend beyond the notion of what the 232 tariffs should be instilled for.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, while the federal government is trying to negotiate on this order and find an agreement with the American administration, an administration that quite clearly is in bad faith and does not seem to want to conclude an agreement that is mutually beneficial for the two parties on either side of the border, do you think it's worthwhile for the Canadian Chambers of Commerce speak to the American Chambers of Commerce, and that Canadian labor groups speak to American labor groups, and that the provincial governments here speak to the state governments in the U.S., and that elected officials speak to their counterparts to maximize pressure on the U.S. administration, to also have lawsuits by Americans against the American government if the actions taken by them are illegal? Do you think it's a good idea?
Thank you, through you again, Chair, to the Vice Chair. This is quite recent, right? These have all been approximately 2 weeks old. So I'd say, especially with the folks that I was talking about, the tool-dye mold makers, these are projects that are just finishing up. And these projects right now are not the projects that are, putting a headlight on a 2026 Ford Fusion or 2027 Ford Edge. This is something that will be installed in the 2028, 2029, down the road. I suspect that the pain has not yet been felt by the purchasers in the United States of these products. I firmly believe that. I think it's too soon. As it relates to, and I do, once that happens, those conversations I do expect to be filtered up. I can tell you right now that I have a very strong relationship with the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Detroit Partnership, and a number of other of my U.S. counterparts. These are conversations that I've had already and will continue to have. I believe that over the next month or so, as these projects are not fulfilled, because as alluded to on Monday, there are projects that are on the floor, shop floors in Windsor Essex right now, that they are not shipping. I know one company specifically has 4 projects done, ready to ship over tools. They're not going to do it because they're not willing to pay that cost of tariff. They're going to wait it out. And in a month, when that doesn't come through and the OEM is now putting pressure on the supplier, that's when I think this tipping point will happen in the United States. So I'd say make sure that we are seasoning the folks in the United States, that this challenge is going to be coming for them. I do think any type of cross-border relationships are extremely important. And I think that, it is incumbent on Windsor Chamber, other border chambers, and also the Ontario and Canadian Chamber of Commerce to build and maintain those relationships. Because at the end of the day, we're not selling our house. We were always going to be neighbors of the United States. They're always going to be, they currently are the largest economic power in the world. So I think having those conversations early to build those relationships will serve us nothing but positive as we move forward.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. If it takes time before the impact of this executive order and this new agreement are brought in, that's beneficial, some agreement beneficial to to our companies. We have SMEs that suggest that perhaps if it lasts for several months, it would be worthwhile to set up a wage subsidy on a temporary basis, targeting those businesses to keep their specialized labor in place until it's settled. We've also heard the suggestion that we should have a government line that is specialized to answer questions by SMEs and businesses on tariffs rather than having to turn to consultants that charge $200 or $300 an hour. What do you and your members think about those two suggestions? Thank you.
Thank you again through you, Chair. Those are very interesting ideas. I do think right now that anything related to cash flow is important. As noted earlier, 3 months, this is not a let's figure it out in a year type situation. We need the next 3 months, 6 months for this to be hammered out and understood. That's why the request right now and the urgency, and I thank everybody involved for listening to us Monday today and Monday, because you all recognize the urgency of what this means for many of the manufacturers, the 8,000 in Windsor, the 60,000 in Ontario, and the 140,000 across Canada. Anything that can allow for those people to continue to employ the skilled, talented labor and continue to put food on the plate is very, very important right now, because regardless of how this plays out over the next year, these folks are going to be the basis for the future industry of Canada, and making sure that they don't disappear over the next 3, 6, 9 months is vitally important.
Merci beaucoup, c'est très clair, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. It's clear. Before turning over the floor, Chair, the study by Ms. Gold that she cited from the University of Calgary also reminded us of the importance of the sector for the Quebec economy, which is just a few points behind the Ontario economy, affected less but substantially the economy of Manitoba and Nova Scotia and also British Columbia. Thank you very much, and thank you for your answers.
Je suis toujours content d'appuyer.
I'm always pleased to support the report that involves Alberta, Manitoba, and Quebec. So thank you very much for that reference.
The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Is for coming here today to be part of this important study. I have my first questions for Mr. Donally. How critical is a long-term trade agreement to the survival of the mold-making industry?
I mean, that is vital. I don't want to say, I would say that is supremely important. 85% approximately, if not more, of the products that are manufactured in our region go to the United States, and even more go through Ontario and then eventually end up in the United States. So a long-term relationship, the continued long-term relationship with the Americans is vital for my region.
And so we've heard that manufacturing represents roughly 1 in 5 jobs in Windsor Essex, which would be about 4,800, 4,900 jobs. And what would be the outcome for our regional economy if this sector is disrupted? And do you have an estimate of how many indirect jobs would be affected as well?
Yeah, thank you through your chair, Borelli. 48,000 jobs, 48,800. So again, 1 in 5 jobs. The economic multiplier as it relates to that, NAICS code 333 is generally accepted to be a 3 to 1. So that's quickly 150,000. So with 240 or so thousand employees in Windsor Essex region, basically every other person will be directly impacted. That doesn't even trickle down. I mean, we represent 775 members across Windsor Essex Chamber of Commerce. We've got approximately 40 of those that are manufacturers, starting from OEMs, Stellantis, Ford, et cetera, all the way down to the lowest level where it's a single employee sole proprietor. It would be impossible for that type of economic impact in our region to not impact every single one of those.
That's a lot of people to worry about, a lot of children in those families, and I worry about those families putting food on the table and paying their mortgages every month, if we don't come to a resolution for this. Can you explain, please, for everyone here, how integrated the Canada-U.S. manufacturing supply chain is particularly in tooling and mold making, and why it's so crucial that we get a deal?
Yes, thank you. Through Chair to MP Borelli. Oftentimes right now the original steel block is brought in from the United States. They've got specialized steel that has been used for decades. Looking forward to working more with Mr. Loomis to make sure that that's Canadian steel. But that is transformed into essentially what makes things, right? So we make things in Windsor Essex that make things. We are the original, we are the upstream where, all the way down the road, you're going to get a plastic bucket somewhere from, you name the home goods store. That plastic bucket, the tool that made the plastic bucket, very likely came from Windsor Essex. That product likely crossed the border multiple times before it was perhaps finally assembled or molded in the United States. Case in point, if I use the Chrysler Pacifica, proudly built in Windsor for upwards of 70 years, there are parts that go into that vehicle that have crossed the border 7 to 8 times, right? So every time, it's hard to unscramble that egg, and to use Doug Ford's terms, it's hard to unscramble that egg. Windsor Essex folks, we don't want to unscramble that egg, right? We want to make more eggs. We want to make sure that the industry can be diversified, but also is reliant on the United States, and that relationship, the long-term economic relationship, continues.
So have you heard from many of your members that they are mold makers, that they plan on moving their companies to the States? And if they do, will we ever get them back?
I have heard from them directly that they are being asked or very much considering it, to the point that Mr. has a party made on Monday. When and if an industry moves, this is a multi-million-dollar industry. These are tools that make the things that cost millions of dollars, time, effort, energy, labor, the ability to move people, very difficult, but they're being asked and they are considering. And right now, the industry's gone from single-digit profitability to now single and double-digit unprofitability because of these current tariffs.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Borelli. Madame O'Rourke, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, all Canadians, all parties want stability. We want to review CUSMA and to get back to a predictable trading relationship with their American counterparts. I think the flyer that was held up was talking about new opportunities to reduce the over-reliance on the United States. But in fact, we have very similar cities, Mr. Donally. Guelph is very, very vulnerable to American tariffs from an agricultural and also an auto parts perspective. And so 16,500 jobs in my riding rely on advanced manufacturing. I just wanted to come back to your recommendations. So you said we need to protect the Canadian tooling capability. Could not agree with you more. What does the bridge look like? You said reinstate temporary blanket remission framework. What does that look like specifically for you?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Echoing your sentiments that our communities are very, very similar. What I believe that blanket or that support looks like, and I alluded to it briefly, but essentially a bank account and the nuances of how that is related between the federal government, provincial government, and the company itself absorbing some of this risk and tariff cost. But when a company is bidding on a project today and they don't know what it's going to look like 6 months from now, they want to be able to have the stability or at least the knowledge that should something like this come into force, and maybe it's 20% by then. It's supposed to go up to 25% 2028, by the way. That they know full well that they can still be profitable when they bid on this project. And I think what's also important, and most people might not know this nuance, is in order to win these projects 6 months, a year ago, especially against U.S. competitors, they had to confirm that whatever the landed cost would be absorbed by the seller, right? So in this case, the last 2 weeks, that increase is 10% on the total value. 6 months ago when they bid on it, they didn't know that was going to happen, right? So having an ability or some sort of account that they know they can continue to be profitable or at least break even for the foreseeable future, and I say for foreseeable 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever that looks like, so that they can continue to bid on jobs, so they can continue to backflow the finished products that are going to be off the floor in the next 3 months, and that they can put new stuff on the floor to keep people employed.
Is that different than the cash flow relief that you're talking about? So there's the regional tariff relief, there's BDC loans, but are you talking about something different in terms of the cash flow relief?
Yeah, I would suggest that this is slightly different. The regional tariff response, regional defense initiative, like companies are applying for these, and I know that some are being successful. This is something that they are actively pursuing. That is a strategic decision that they're making, and these are strategic files, often, or strategic loans, or strategic initiatives to help diversify our economy. What's happening right now is this is not a strategic thing. This is an immediacy thing that companies need to be able to pay the bills, and 3 months, 6 months down the road, they may not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want a moment to ask Mr. Loomis a question. You are sitting in Atlanta right now at the North American Steel Conference. I probably got that name wrong, but what are you hearing from your American counterparts? Obviously, the U.S. Department of Commerce supports their 232 actions. There are some metal associations in the United States that have also expressed it. But what are you hearing on the ground, and do they realize the cost drivers that this involves?
Yeah, part of the great disappointment that we've had over the last couple of years as a Canadian steel industry is that it's our colleagues down south who have been advocating for these policies. They finally have their grievances being addressed. So the primary producers, and in our case, the American Institute of Steel Construction, they have, well, first of all, they've been outcompeted by Canadian firms, especially in particular regions of the United States. And so through this president, because it is the person who can pay the Mar-a-Lago membership or get into the ear of the right people, they've been able to get their grievances addressed. But I do want to underscore that it's all the other derivative downstream companies, associations in the United States that are suffering. And I've heard repeatedly from many others, and just because of how tightly integrated we are, it's been very difficult to navigate this new world. You have to have customs brokers and lawyers and so many other professional services surrounding you. And most companies in the steel industry here in the United States, again, in the derivative steel industry, would like to return to a tariff-free regime between our two countries.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame O'Rourke. Monsieur Saint-Marie, 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. The first question from Mr. Loomis concerning Chinese steel that you referred to in your presentation and in the answers. We know that the sector of construction in China has diminished considerably in recent years because of the overcapacity for construction steel and low price selling. So to protect ourselves against the importing of cheap Chinese steel seems reasonable that you referred to. It wouldn't necessitate legislation. The government has full authority to do so by order in council under the Special Importation Measures Act, and the WTO rules allow it if it's for a maximum of 5 years. Are you optimistic that the government will go ahead with such an order in council, or are you concerned that the most recent diplomatic measures to get closer to China will make it difficult to protect ourselves against that anti-dumping? Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie.
There's no illusion that this is easy for the government. There are all kinds of other voices and industries in this country that need to be heard, and this is very, very difficult for sure. I think when it comes to steel in particular, however, steel is perhaps unique in all the world in terms of a commodity, and I think it should be understood that we're not the only ones. Again, as I said, the whole kernel of truth in the 232 tariffs is that in fact, the capacity of of steel in China only continues to grow, despite these issues and despite the fact that the rest of the steel world is pointing to them and asking them to play by the rules. So we're not alone. I think in this case, it should be an international effort. This is where we're encouraging to work with the United States to form a Fortress North America. We think that would, if we could do that, that would have more benefit to the North American steel industry than what the U.S. is doing right now in the imposition of the 232 tariffs.
Merci beaucoup. J'aurais eu d'autres questions, mais mon temps.
Thank you very much. I have more questions, but my time is up. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie.
Committee, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for holding these hearings. I truly appreciate it. So do the people in Windsor West. Mr. Donally, we are hearing some remarks from the current government when it comes to trade, which indicates that there is a binary choice between the U.S. and the rest of the world. But the people we speak in Windsor want to make sure Canada is strong enough at home to compete both in the U.S. and the rest of the world without sacrificing our workers. As you have said before, tooling is not optional. This is the essential layer that is foundational for autos, industrial production, defense, and if tooling leaves, everything else follows. So based on the current reality, what are the future prospects for our region, our country, and our future partnership with the U.S.?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Interesting question because, you know, I'm perpetually an optimist, right? If I think of our current situation in Windsor Essex 3 weeks ago, we just landed a third shift at Stellantis, recognizing that that's not the case everywhere. The next Star battery plant just opened. The Gordie Howe Bridge is finalizing. We're about to break ground on a new acute care hospital. So for Windsor Essex, I remain very optimistic. I do think that there is, and going back to my point earlier, an importance of growing the pie and not just splitting the pie different ways. So do I think that diversification is important? Extremely important. I also think diversification of customer and supplier is extremely important. That can't come at the expense of one country versus another, in my opinion. So I do believe that maintaining the relationship with the United States, growing that relationship with the United States, but also growing relationship with other countries and other destinations and other suppliers all throughout the world is also important. I think that positions us best to ensure that there's a long-term economic viability of our community and our businesses, but it cannot be underscored enough how important the current relationship, and I say current meaning the past 70 years, has been in establishing deep relationship and deep integrated supply chain between our two countries, that can't be unraveled. And if it is, the 85% of folks that are, or the 85% of products that are headed to the United States, that is a pretty grave situation if that disappears for many of our regions.
True. Quickly, if you could, we have seen significant impacts based on our unemployment rate. And if this current model continues, what do you think is the prospects for our future generations? Are they going to become economic refugees as well? Are they going to have to go elsewhere in the world to find opportunities?
Thank you again, through you, Chair. Sorry, old habit there.
Next one.
Economic refugees, I mean, the unemployment rate, I started a week after Donald Trump was elected in office, so I've seen the ebb and flow. I've seen from my first few weeks on the job when tariffs were threatened across the industry, 25% across the board, and not relying on CUSMA or not allowing CUSMA to continue. The threat and the panic, what that looked like. At that point, we saw unemployment rates go up. Once that CUSMA relationship was upheld, the unemployment rates in Windsor went back down to 7.9% over the summer, right? Which for us is not a bad number. What's happening right now over the past 2 weeks is the first real, tangible, significant, direct impact to our businesses. Like, this is what's different. It's not a threat anymore. This is a tariff that is directly impacting the economic viability of thousands and thousands of people in Windsor, Ontario, and Canada. And with an economic multiplier of at least 3, we're talking about, tens of thousands of jobs in southwestern Ontario. So thank you, sir.
Mr. Lewis, you can have the rest of my time, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you for this to come on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. I think I'm going to call you Captain Donnelly instead. And I understand you were the captain of the Windsor Spitfires, and obviously you got drafted by the Calgary Flames and played in the AHL for quite some time. But I know when you were with the Spitfires, you were likely playing with the Plymouth Whalers or the Flint Firebirds against them, or the Erie Otters. And so and I realized that where you were in the corner, because you're a big man, sir, like a big, strong man. I mean, you had elbows up. You absolutely had elbows up. But at the end of every game, you went to center ice and you shook hands with our friends from Michigan and our friends from Ohio, as an example, our hockey friends. For the sake of the industry, for the sake of the jobs, how important is it for now for our government to meet with the U.S. government at center ice, shake hands, and get a deal done?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I didn't know where you're going with that. I mean, yeah, 40 pounds ago, I was a hockey player. Yeah, I do think, if we think about the past year in a bit, and if this is all a lead up to July 1st in the formal review of CUSMA, and if we think of all of this as being posturing for the past little while, I do think it's extremely important that we do recognize that our adversary also can be our friend. And shaking hands with a deal that benefits both sides, I think, is very, very important. I look forward to that day.
Thanks, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Donally, I'm glad I'm not the only one here who can reference 40 pounds ago, so I appreciate that. Mr. Baines, you're going to close us off here with 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today on this discussion, important and vital industry discussion. I'm going to just go to Mr. Anderson, actually, to include him in the conversation as well. Earlier in April, Saskatchewan Industrial and Mining Suppliers Association, the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries, and the Southeast Tech Hub Incorporated received federal funds in just close to $1 million in federal and provincial funding to support advanced nuclear supply chains in Saskatchewan. Can you maybe talk a little bit about supply chains, advancing innovation and sustainable energy solutions, in this whole context of this, the tariffs that are being applied, and maybe just shed some light on what your thoughts are?
Well, thank you for the question. And it's an interesting world here. Yeah, we've been largely insulated thanks to the great work of the Government of Canada over the past years because of the potash and uranium, the critical minerals that we produce, and that's our major business, being, somewhat insulated, I guess. The threats of new tariffs could drastically change that, make things different, and we've had some members had some significant impacts. But one of the things we've been doing is nuclear power begins in Saskatchewan. We are the uranium mining, capital of North America and pretty much the world, coming up on that. And so our members, as we look at nuclear power and nuclear builds, we have some federal funding there. We've hired some incredible persons. The former chief engineer Westinghouse now works for us to help our members evolve and become equipped in the nuclear power sector. We're also now working into the defense sector and accreditation with funding there. And we look towards the major projects office. For example, if we could get a procurement office in Saskatchewan to help our members engage in these programs, it would be wonderful. I mean, we can build big things here. Our members are the people responsible for helping BHP build the largest mine they've ever built and the largest mine in the world. It's $18 billion. We can build big things here, and we're just looking forward to engaging going further.
Thank you, and I think that's where the rest of the mold making and the tools and those industries that can benefit definitely from there. And I'll go to Mr. Donally. The war in Iran has caused a significant surge in prices for many of our commodities here. So aluminum, my home province of British Columbia, and Quebec, Saskatchewan, potash, and Alberta oil and gas. Can this strengthen our position for the CUSMA review, in your view?
Thank you, through you, Chair. If I look at the resources, natural resources, physical resources, labor resources we have in our country, I think we are positioned extremely well to be an economic powerhouse for a long, long time. If we think of Canada, the United States as, as Mr. Loomis alluded to, one region, we've got a potential, and we already have economic strength, but I think we could be an economic superpower. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll continue. With respect to the Windsor Essex Chamber of Commerce, you have strong relationships with business and chambers across the border. With your history in hockey even, you probably have strong relationships there. Your thoughts on the actions of the Trump administration and the effect that it's had on their local economies? What are you hearing from your counterparts on the other side?
Yeah, again, thank you through you, Chair. To a person, the folks that I meet with are not, they feel sad because of the relationship that has been threatened and, devolved over the past year. Very, very few people that I've met with have said, this is great for our business, our country. It really is a situation that, a year and a half ago, we were best friends, neighbors, colleagues, allies, et cetera. And here we are with the Trump administration placing a tariff on industries, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, jobs at risk, which also undermines their own economy.
Have they shared measurable impacts on their local economies?
We will be getting more of those impact statements over the coming weeks, specifically with this as it relates to when these products start hitting the floors. Or not hitting the floors, sorry.
Sure, and the Gordie Howe Bridge. A lot has been said about that. A lot of news about that. But again, similar type of question. What's the reaction in the community with the bridge coming online pretty soon? I believe the testing's happening right now. What are they talking about on the other side about the good faith, the lack of good faith potentially?
I mean, this is a discussion that has happened over 25 years, from the initial idea of a Gordie Howe Bridge to where we're at today with, it opening in the coming weeks, hopefully, if not early months. This is a piece of infrastructure that will span a generation or generations. This is a bridge, literal, figurative, whatever you want to call it, that let's hope that this summer, while it's open, we're crossing that literal or theoretical bridge with open arms, ensuring that the two countries that have been best friends, neighbors, allies for generations are coming together to work in harmony again, and I'm looking forward to that day opening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baines. Witnesses, appreciate you very much being here with us today. We understand it's a challenging time for your industries, for your employees, for you both professionally and personally, and availing yourselves to us on short notice is not only very helpful in regards to the insight it provides, but something we greatly appreciate. So thank you for making yourselves available. Mr. Loomis, if you do find yourself getting into Mar-a-Lago while you're down in the United States, make sure you put in a plug for us.
I'll do my best.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you so much for the opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Meeting suspended as we turn over.